how fantastic to talk in a church and to talk to so many people. This is quite good. So, as Mark said, I'm a designer. I am usually based in Oslo at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design. We do a lot of research there. We do research into service design, in interaction design, and in product design. And I think this is it's a interesting time for those three separate disciplines, because we're sort of seeing the point where there's a new kind of hybrid product that combines all of those separate kind of disciplines into one thing. So I want to look today a little bit at physical interaction, some of the history that I've had with designing for physical interaction, what's happened over the last few years with mobile technology, to look at some of the work, the research work that we've done, some of the design work that we've done, and then to look at how we might start approaching a kind of user experience design for these kind of hybrid products that cross between physical products and networks. So I think, in the research that I'm doing, we're quite privileged to be able to to have time and space and funding to look a little bit into the near future and just imagine how products and services might change over the next few years, and to specifically sort of investigate how we might start to do interaction design in the near future. So like I said, we really want to investigate the kind of hybrid between a physical product and a digital service, and what are the implications for products and what are the implications for design. This is a bunch of RFID chips that I've collected from around the world over the last few years, and I find it quite fascinating that digital interaction is moving out into the world. It's becoming physical, and I think this is the stuff that has really excited me over the last few years. But I want to know how we can design for these things. What kind of designers should we be, and what kind of processes should we be using? But I wanted to start the story with just the inspiration for really doing all of this work was actually very close to this place. In 2004, there was a conference called Design Engaged, with a bunch of 24 really, really lovely people sitting in a room for 3 days, talking about all the wonderful stuff that was bubbling up at that point in 2004, where social networks were starting to take off. People were starting to do stuff with location. There was an awful lot of talk about how the web was becoming fantastic and things were really starting to emerge. It was an incredibly exciting time. And that's Matt Jones in the picture there, who at the time was working at Nokia. And with him, he brought this new concept phone from Nokia called the 5140 RFID. And at the bottom there, you see the little circle. It had an RFID reader in it. So if you touched this phone to an object in the world that had an RFID chip, like your travel cards and bus passes in Amsterdam, like the Oyster card in London, you could create an interaction between the phone and the physical object. And we got really, I got particularly excited by this, the idea that we could have a phone that was a bit like a kind of remote control for the world, or that we could use the phone as a way of picking up objects, picking up services, picking up media from the physical world. So turning actual physical objects that stand around us into interfaces. And I thought that was an exciting possibility. It was also a time when Nokia was doing kind of interesting stuff like this Nokia Wave Messenger. Here's Matt Webb at the time, who was using this Nokia thing, which it was like a mobile add-on shell that you could wave in the air. It had a strip of LEDs. It wrote with persistence of vision in the air. And it's a kind of useless thing, but it was a time of experimentation with kind of phones and objects and how you could interact with the world around you. And there was a lot of talk at that time about a guy called Paul Dorish, who wrote a book in 2001 called Where the Action Is, Embodied Interaction. And he talks about how when you are just interacting with the world, you are participating in it and acting through it in the absorbed and unreflective manner of normal experience. And this was kind of like an idea. Let's try and make interfaces that, instead of actually focusing all of our attention on them, that are just part of the physical world. And this, again, we were sort of getting really excited about that. So more recently, Matt Jones has left Nokia and has written about what he calls the kind of lost future of touching the world versus touching the screen. And what seems to have happened is that instead of using the phone to actually sort of interact with the world, we've gone towards this kind of vision of using the phone, as a large screen. And I think this is a concept by Nokia that came out in 2007 that was about just using physical interaction to very peripherally and without directing your attention at it to change the status of the phone. And these concepts were still around at that time. There's a guy called Mark Smith who works for Microsoft Research, and he says again that most digital interaction takes place in another interaction order, in another space. It's not digital interaction is not in the same physical interaction. It's not in the same order of co-presence. It doesn't happen between us. So the internet happens somewhere else. We go on the internet. We go somewhere else to access these things. And I think that's very, very true with these large screen devices. It's now become the culturally dominant form of interaction. I mean, really, if you think about the sort of the culture of mobile interaction, it's really focused on the touch screen and interacting with this slab of glass. So these kinds of media surfaces, they dominate because they're brilliant. I mean, they're absolutely wonderful. They're so adaptable. We can do all sorts of stuff with them. They're infinitely scalable. We can put all sorts of applications on a single device. So in essence, they're quite cheap. We can do an awful lot of stuff with a screen. I'm just quite amazed by how these slabs of glass have taken over the cultural, sort of the popular imagination. And I think there's a very interesting, very sort of startling story recently that there was an application called Camera Plus, which is an incredibly popular iPhone application that was rejected because they decided to use the volume button on the iPhone to take pictures with. So it got, this incredibly high-profile application got rejected because they decided to, quite sensibly use a volume button when you were in camera mode to help you take a picture, as opposed to trying to hold something in your hand like that and press that little iPhone, that iPhone camera button. So I think, what has happened is physical or dedicated or specialist hardware interaction has been completely sort of uprooted and thrown away against this kind of screen-based interaction. With things like AR, augmented reality, and the idea that we might use the screen as a kind of, as a sort of gestural interface to the world, looking through the screen at the world, it's also very compelling, and I quite like these concepts by Mac Funamitsu, the kind of the future of web search. What is it about looking at the world instead of actually typing on a keyboard? But I'm also a little bit troubled by augmented reality. I'm a bit troubled by the idea that we're looking through sheets of glass at the world. And I think everything from the gesture that you have to do to interact with AR through to the actual sort of idea of being separated from the world with these things, I think it's a bit strange. So I'm going to argue a bit provocatively, because I do love all of these things, really. I'm going to argue for the fact that we can look at other kinds of interaction and physical interaction as one of the ways we can design with this stuff. So this is a video we made as part of the research project that I was involved with, that was trying to sort of sensitize us to the fact that the world is full of interaction potential. We're surrounded by an incredible number of radio waves, all sorts of different kinds of waves, things going on in the world, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, all of these things that we know about. They exist in the world and they're incredibly spatial. So they're all, we can use them for all sorts of different purposes. Has something gone strange with the color? It's looking quite purple. That's better, good. So on a very small scale, RFID, these phones that contain small little RFID chips that can read wireless information from the world, they also have spatial qualities. So when you check in and you check out on the tram in Amsterdam, you're interacting with that little bubble that exists around the RFID reader on the tram. So one of the things we tried to do in this project was really to try and reconceptualize the technology as spatial. And we did a photographic project where we took an Oyster card from London, and in a darkened room, we poked at it with an LED with an RFID reader on it. And what we built up was these kind of simulations or visualizations of what an RFID field looks like. So you can actually start to see what the RFID field around an Oyster card looks like, or out around your bank card or your chip card or whatever it is, whatever RFID it is that you're using. And I think this was one of our aims in the research, was to sort of start looking at this very common technology and to start reconceiving of it as a kind of spatial technology that we can use for gestural interaction, to understand how far these waves reach, how we can use them as interaction designers. It's looking super purple. I wonder if I shift these. Okay, good. Well, this is one of the interfaces we developed, and this is kind of the opposite of a very multi-purpose device. This is a very specialized device that only works in certain contexts. It's kind of expensive. It's like the opposite of a screen. It's very, very kind of, the materials and the qualities of the thing is very, very sort of specialist and one-off. But it's really to sort of, to look at physical interaction with media and how we might start to design the objects that we can interact with media in the home or using physical objects. Could we have the sound up on the... So these wooden objects have RFID chips inside them. One of the reasons why we like the technology is that we can embed things inside other things, and it's incredibly easy to do. It's kind of it's quite a low-tech thing to do, really. Many of you might have seen TikiTag. I think that TikiTag is a sort of commercial platform that's trying to do things like this. But I think the focus here is trying to look at how we might sort of actually create something that's quite special, like sort of using high-quality materials and creating very specific interactions with media where the link between the object and the media is very, very clear. And this is not envisioning. That was video from user tests. So that the level of engagement with media changes. And instead of being a passive sit-back experience, it becomes a very sort of a very active experience, which it's an interesting change to change the interface and to change the kind of engagement you have with media. This is another project that uses RFID to. It's a toy dog that was originally designed for people for kids who had difficulty seeing, to use the dog's nose as a way of sniffing objects. And he is actually a very nicely designed object. One of my students, Sarah Johansson, designed it and spent a long time sort of getting a physical product that has so much interaction inside it and is soft and has to work in the world. It's not an easy thing to do. But there's something really nice and playful about a physical object that has these kind of qualities and these kind of abilities. And again, a physical object that doesn't seem interactional, it just seems like another companion, but it has some special qualities and reacts to certain objects. So the dog's behaviors changed depending on what kind of tag he was sniffing. what he was doing and what activity they were engaged with. So on a similar note, this is actually not a real product. This is an envisioned product, a very simple envisioning of what an iPhone might look like when it can actually act as an interface to the world. It's an iPhone with a kind of a supposed RFID reader on it. We didn't actually make it work, but this is an idea for how we might actually access media through objects on an iPhone screen. But again, it's about the specific relationships between media and between the media and the objects that actually forms a successful experience. So I think the interaction metaphor of touching things in the world is a very lovely way of actually making interfaces, and I think it's an interesting way of designing. I think it shows quite interesting promise for entertainment and advertising. So beyond RFID, we've been looking at a number of products that you can buy. I'm kind of interested in looking at the kind of products that you could actually go to the shop and actually buy right now. And it turns out there's an awful lot of stuff, physical stuff that you can actually get that actually becomes pretty useless if it doesn't have a network connection. There's a lot of stuff in the world now that requires a service, a digital component that actually doesn't work anymore if it's purely physical. So I want to talk about the kind of way that we might start thinking about designing these objects. And it's incredibly hard. I think we have to start, as a group of designers, we have to start thinking about designing everything from a physical product through to all the connections that those products have, through to having a service or a social network or other digital things attached to it. So the design challenge for these products becomes quite enormous. I think the Nike Plus is perhaps it's like the canonical, prototypical example of these products. People generally know what it is. It's a little RFID thing that fits in your shoe. It has a pedometer. It roughly calculates how far you've run. It's physically simple. It doesn't require much setup. The design of that physical object is actually very, very well done. And the fact that it's just a shoe that talks to your iPod is quite incredible. On the second level of the experience, the shoe talks to your iPod. It talks to your computer, and it actually starts to share that information over time. So it has a sort of a short-term use. You have motivation to use the Nike Plus to upload your latest run or to connect to your friends. There's a very good incentive to actually connect the thing. And then on top of that, there's the whole kind of social network and competition structure and digital structure beyond that that's actually starting to collect all this data and visualize it. So the complete product is quite enormous and very, very broad. So implementing all of those different things as a complete unified experience is an enormous challenge. And I don't think it's happening just in physical, in products that we buy from the shops. Everyday things like Oyster cards are starting to output data, so we can see the last few trips that we've made. And people are starting to build games. There's some fantastic games in London built on your Oyster card usage, which are sort of starting to turn your everyday interactions with an infrastructure into kind of digital services that can be built on top of them. So just to run through those three kind of levels of user experience, on the first level of the kind of tangible, of the thing that you hold in your hands, we need to do really good industrial design, product design here, to actually make a product that gets used, doesn't break, can be used in incredibly harsh circumstances depending on its use. But to actually create a product that generates good data, to create a product like the Nike Plus, which actually creates the kind of data that you need to analyze in order to make all the other stuff, you actually need to have, it needs to be a very, very well-designed piece of product design. On the second level, the kind of connectivity and sharing, the incentive to basically plug the thing into your computer and actually get information elsewhere and to share it on Twitter and do stuff with it, actually make the data that comes out of that thing social. That's another challenge, to actually get the thing out into the world, out into the social networks. And then over the long term, the idea of actually visualizing and turning that data into social networks, the actual long-term relationship with this thing, that also needs another separate design discipline going for it. And I think building that kind of that ongoing relationship with the service is becoming one of the really critical tasks for product design. So I think these kind of feedback loops, they're working over time. There's a kind of immediate feedback loop when you're using something in the world. There's a longer-term feedback loop when you say, okay, I want to share this data. And then there's an even more long-term loop that goes on when you're actually starting to reflect and use that data as part of your life. And I think Martin mentioned that there's an event happening about the quantified self, and I think the idea that the data is going out there and we're starting to use that data in personal and social ways, what Matt Jones and Tom Coates talk about as the kind of personal informatics. I think it's a very interesting way of using products to help us reflect on things and reflect on things socially. But I think this model can be used to sort of analyze the way that we design products, or the way that the products have been designed. Like I said, the Nike Plus has these 3 levels, and I think at each level they've been designed incredibly well. There's not too many hurdles in that experience. But something like the Nabaz tag that's recently gone bust did very nice with their physical interface. They had this little bunny with its ears that turned around. I really liked it. I thought it was great. But on the other side, they had these pretty poor services and widgets that didn't really do that many interesting things. So you had this kind of beautiful physical, or this kind of strange physical object in your house that wasn't really connected to anything that useful, and the way in which it went out into the world wasn't actually that well thought through. So that's again incredibly difficult to do, but it wasn't done really well in that case. Other examples such as the Watson, which measures your household energy, it also has problems here and there, and I don't think that the social and networked side of it has been designed that well. But as a physical product, again, it's quite good. It has a glanceable display. It's been designed as a kind of system that you can play with. And returning to a technology like RFID, near-field communication on the mobile phone, it's been conceived as a kind of linking technology, that we touch the world and we link. But there's been very little thought applied to how that actually turns into a connection or turns into something else, what kind of services go alongside it in the world over the long term. So I think we can actually also use this model to start thinking and generating new ideas about the way we can use technology. So I just wanted to end with a short film that I made in collaboration with Jack Schultz at Berg. It's a short film that explores some of these ideas about proximity and touch and physical interaction, and I'll play it now. If we can have the sound up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Timo.
Questions?
Right on time, perfect. Let me ask one question that was asked on Twitter. Why do we need RFID if we have image recognition?
I think that's a really good question. I think RFID was a very interesting technology. It has failed quite badly as a as an emerging technology. It's pretty unreliable. It's relatively expensive compared to facial recognition or barcode recognition. The reason why I still quite like it, because I've spent 3 years investigating it, but I still quite like it. It's a very tangible technology. You put two objects together and something happens. When you're pointing a phone at someone or at a barcode or at something, the kind of quality of the interaction is very different. It doesn't feel the same. So I think there may be similarities in the kind of identification that's going on, or the kind of data that's coming out of those things. But in terms of the quality of your interaction with, with the world, it's very, very different. Interacting with little fields is quite nice, and it's very quick. With barcodes, anybody who's tried a barcode reader on the iPhone knows that it's not something you do as you're getting onto the tram. It's a very, very different kind of thing.
Some? No audience? No? Okay.
Hi, my name is Steven. I was wondering, have you seen any successful initiatives yet for making a digital receipt, just in general for supermarkets, that you can immediately get your transaction data onto your phone and into your accounting system?
I haven't seen anything that does that really well. I think the promise of having RFID on mobile phones is that you pay with your phone, you get all of your transactions on your phone. It's like the ideal kind of frictionless capitalism. But no, it hasn't been solved yet. I think there are multiple people working on that. But I'm a little bit wary as well as a designer at trying to solve really enormous infrastructural problems. It has to come from platforms, and it has to come from the hardware manufacturers and the operators. So there's things as a research project that we tried to avoid because it would require such enormous infrastructural change. We tried to focus on kind of small scale, self-contained things that we could properly test and roll out.
Shall we do it in the drinks? There's opportunity for more questions. Sir? Opportunity to react.
It's an interesting point, because I think there's a tendency to, when it comes to digital payment, to think about doing the actual payment also through RFID, instead of just using the already existing payment methods like cash or PIN or whatever, and doing the transaction data. So actually just a receipt on your mobile.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, yeah.
Hi, Timo. You mentioned a couple of other products out besides mobile phones, like the iPod or the Nike Plus device, and it seems like a lot of conversation with clients or around these kinds of mobile devices keep converging to, oh, well, why don't we just use the accelerometer in the phone and wear it on our ankle or something? I'm wondering, do you see that that conversation is going to continue to always push towards converging all of this functionality into the phone, or what can you say about being optimistic about there being objects that have relationships with the phone, whether you carry them or just have them in your house?
I think what we've realized over the course of doing all this work is that doing custom specialist small bits of hardware is incredibly expensive and problematic. And that's the reason why everything tends to converge on phones. And it's quite lovely that we've got these brilliant platforms with all the amazing sensors that they have. And I think one of our latest projects is actually looking at what kind of data can we pull out of an iPhone. What are the kind of opportunities for turning that kind of data into other, social networks or whatever? There are lots of opportunities there. But I would always love to see specialist hardware. But as you know, I think producing stuff for small groups, small communities, producing specialist things will be the way that happens, I think.
So I think more questions will be asked during the drinks. Timo Arnall, thank you again.
Thank you.